Chapter 3. How Siegfried Came to Worms. This prince was never troubled by heartfelt sorrow, but one day he heard a report that there was a maiden living in Burgundy, who was a perfect beauty, and from her, as it fell out, he was to receive much joy, yet also great distress. The young lady's most rare beauty was known far and wide, and many warriors had also learned of her spirited disposition, so that her perfections attracted many visitors to Gunther's country. But however many suitors came to woo her, Kriemhild never admitted to herself in her innermost thoughts that she wanted any as her lover, since as yet her future lord was a stranger to her. Siegfried's thoughts were now bent on a noble attachment, and beside his claims to favor all others were as nothing. Brave Siegfried was well endowed to win the hearts of lovely women, and in the event noble Kriemhild became his wife. Seeing that he aspired to a constant love, his kinsmen and many of his vassals counseled him to woo a lady of suitable standing. "I shall take Kriemhild for the fair maiden of Burgundy," he answered boldly, "on account of her very great beauty, since even if the mightiest of emperors wished to marry, I knew he would not demean himself in loving the noble princess." The affair came to Sigmund's ears through the gossip of his courtiers, who said that Siegfried meant to woo the noble maiden, a design which grieved his father deeply. Queen Sieglind learned of this too, and having no illusions about Gunther and his men, she feared greatly for the life of her son. Thus they tried to turn the young knight's thoughts against this enterprise. "But, dear father," answered Siegfried, "rather than not woo where my heart finds great delight, I would quite forego the love of noble ladies. All would be in vain, whatever anyone should say." "If you are set on it, then I am heartily glad of your intentions," replied the king, "and I shall help you to accomplish them to the best of my powers. Yet remember, Gunther has many proud vassals. Were there no other than Hagen, he has such haughty ways that I fear we might regret it if we asked for the princess's hand." "How should that trouble us?" asked Siegfried. "Whatever I fail to get from them by friendly requests, I shall take by my own valor. I fancy I shall wrest their lands and people from them." "What you say distresses me," replied King Sigmund, "since if this we repeated at Worms, they would never let you ride into Burgundy. I have known Gunther's and Grenot's ways for a long time. I have been told on good authority that none will ever win the girl by force. But if you mean to ride there in the company of warriors, I shall put our friends to the test, and summon them at once." "It is not my wish, and I indeed should regret it if warriors were to accompany me to Burgundy on a warlike expedition to win the handsome girl, for I am well able to gain her by my own unaided powers. I shall go to Gunther's country as one of a band of 12, and you must help me to get there, father." Following this, his stalwarts were furnished with clothes and lined with vari-colored squirrel. This came to the ears of his mother Sieglind too. Fearing to lose him at the hands of Gunther's vassals, the noble queen shed many tears in sad concern for her darling son. But Lord Siegfried went to see her, and addressing her kindly said, "You must not weep for me, my lady. I shall not go in fear of any fighting man, I promise you, and if you will help me in my march to Burgundy by providing me with followers with clothes such as proud warriors may wear with honor, I shall thank you most sincerely." "Since you will not be dissuaded," answered the Lady Sieglind, "I will help you on your journey, though you are my only son, and I shall give you and your companions to take with you ample stocks of the finest clothes that knights ever wore." Young Siegfried thanked the queen with a bow. "I intend to have on my journey 12 warriors all told," he said, "and it is for them that the clothes must be made. I should much like to see how matters stand with Kriemhild." Thus lovely women sat day and night with scarcely any rest till Siegfried's clothes were ready, since he was firmly resolved on his journey. His father commanded the knightly equipment in which Siegfried was going abroad to be richly adorned, with gleaming corslets, sturdy helmets, and finely broad shields were made ready for his companions. When the time drew near for them to set out for Burgundy, people began anxiously to wonder whether they would ever return. But the warriors themselves ordered their clothes and armor to be loaded onto pack horses. Their chargers were handsome, and their harnesses shone red with gold. And if there were any man alive who were prouder than Siegfried and his companions, they had no cause to be so. Siegfried now asked leave to depart for Burgundy, and the king and queen sadly granted it, at which he counseled them affectionately. "Do not weep on my account," he said. "Never fear that I shall ever be in danger." The knights were sorry at his going, and many young ladies wept. I imagine their hearts had truly foretold them that it would end in death for so many of their friends. They were lamenting, not without reason, for they had good cause to do so. A week later, in the morning, Siegfried's valiant company rode on to the sandy riverbank at Worms. All their equipment shone red with gold, their chargers went with even pace, their harnesses was good to see, and they bore bright new shields of ample width. Their helmets were very handsome, and never were such magnificent robes seen upon warriors as when Siegfried rode to court in Gunther's land. The points of the sword dangled beside the spurs, and these excellent knights carried sharp spears. Siegfried's had a head 2 spans across, with fearful cutting edges. Their hands held golden bridles, and the protrudes were of silk. In such style did they arrive. Crowds began to stare at them on all sides, as many of Gunther's vassals ran out to meet them. Proud warriors, knights, and squires alike, they went out to those lords as they were bound to do, and they welcomed the strangers to their master's country, and relieved them of mounts and shields. The squires were about to lead the chargers to stable, when brave Siegfried quickly said, "Leave our horses where they are. We shall soon be riding away. For such is my intention. If anyone knows where I can find the great King Gunther of Burgundy, let him tell me frankly." "You can easily find him if you wish," answered one of their number who knew. "I saw him with his warriors in the spacious hall. Go there, and you will find him in the company of fine men in plenty." Now it was announced to the king that some gay knights had arrived, clad in dazzling corselets and magnificent robes. There, though none in Burgundy knew them. The king was curious to know where these lovely lordly warriors were from, in their bright clothes and with their fine, broad, new shields, and he was sorry that none could tell him. But Otwin of Metz, who is accounted both mighty and brave, made answer, "Since we do not know a man of them, send for my uncle Hagen and let him take a look at them. He knows all the kingdoms and foreign countries, so that if these lords were known to him, he would tell us." The king accordingly summoned Hagen and his men, and as they came to court they made a splendid sight. Hagen asked the king's pleasure. "There are strange knights within my walls whom nobody knows. If you have ever seen them, Hagen, tell me who they are." "I will do so," answered Hagen. Going to a window, he directed his gaze to the strangers. Their whole turnout pleased him greatly, but they were total strangers to him, here in Burgundy. He declared that whatever these knights had come from to Worms, they must be either princes or princes' envoys, judging by their handsome chargers and splendid clothes. And whichever land they had left, they were men of spirit. "Although I have never seen them," said Hagen, "I dare assert my belief that the knight who makes such a magnificent figure there is Siegfried. Whatever his purpose, he is bringing unheard of news to this country, for this warrior slew the bold Nibelungs, and 2 mighty princes, Siegfried and Nibelung. And marvelous were the deeds he has done since in his great strength, riding unaccompanied past the foot of the mountain. As I was truly told, he chanced upon a host of valiant men, whom he had never seen before, gathered around Nibelung's treasure, all of which they had borne out from the cavern. Now hear the strange tale how the Nibelungs were intent on dividing it. Siegfried marveled as he watched them, for he came so near that he could see these warriors and they him. "Here comes mighty Siegfried of the Netherlands," said one of them, and mysterious were the things which he experienced among them. Siegfried was well received by Schiblung and Nibelung, and those noble young princes begged and implored the handsome man by common consent to make the safe vision of the treasure, and this he promised to do. He saw so many precious stones, we are told, that 100 baggage wagons could not have carried them, and an even greater quantity of red gold of Nibelung's country, all of which bold Siegfried was asked to divide for them. They gave him Nibelung's sword in payment, but they had scant profit from the service which the good warrior was to render them. He was unable to finish his task, so enraged were they. But although they had 12 brave men among their friends there, mighty giants they were, how could it avail them? Siegfried slew them in fury, and he also subdued 700 men of Nibelung land with the good sword Balmung, so that in dread of his sword, and also of brave Siegfried, a host of young warriors wielded the land and its castles to him as their lord. Furthermore, he slew the mighty Prince Schiblung and Nibelung, and he came in great peril from Albric, who hoped to avenge his masters there and then, till Siegfried's huge strength was brought home to him, for the powerful dwarf was no match for him. They ran towards the cavern like raging lions, and here he won from Albric the cloak of invisibility. Thus Siegfried, terrible man, was now lord of all the treasure. All who dared fight lay slain there. Siegfried commanded the hoard to be taken back to the cave whence Niglin's men had fetched it. And after swearing oaths to Siegfried that he would be his humble servant, Albric was made Lord Treasurer. Indeed, he was in all ways ready to do his bidding. These are the deeds that he has done, continued Hagen of Tronic. No warrior was ever so strong. But I know more concerning him. This hero slew a dragon and bathed in its blood, from which his skin grew horny so that no weapon will bite it, as has been some time and time again. We must receive this young lord with more than usual honor, lest we incur his enmity. He is so valiant and has performed so many marvels, thanks to his bodily strength, that it is best to have his friendship. I'm sure you are right, replied the great king. Just see how he stands there, all eager for battle, together with his men, the image of a fearless warrior. Let us go down to meet them. You may do so without loss of honor, said Hagen, since he is of noble race, the son of a mighty king. I'll swear from his manner that it is no trifle which brings him riding here. Then he is welcome, answered the king. We have told that he is both well and brave, and shall profit from here in Burgundy. Thus Gunther went out to Siegfried, and, accompanied by his warriors, received their visitor with flawless courtesy, so that the handsome man inclined his head in thanks for fair welcome. I should very much like to know why you have come here, noble Siegfried, and what business it is that brings you to Worms of the Rhine. This I shall not hide from you, the stranger answered him. I was told repeatedly in my father's country that the bravest warriors that king ever had were to be found with you, and I came to see for myself. I have also heard such warlike qualities ascribed to you, that according to many people in all the lands about, a more valiant prince is never seen, nor shall I desist till I know the truth of it. I too am a warrior, and am entitled to wear a crown, but I wish to achieve the reputation of possessing a land and people in my own sole right, for which my head and honor shall be pledged. From since, as they tell me, you are so brave, and I do not care who minds, I will wrest from you by force all that you possess. Your lands and your castles shall all be subject to me. The king and his vassals were amazed to hear this news, that Siegfried meant to deprive him of his lands, and as Gunther's warriors listened, they felt their anger rise. But how have I deserved that through the strength of any man you should lose what my father so long maintained in honor? Asked Gunther. Were we to let this happen, it would be poor proof that we too practice the art of war. I shall not yield my claim, answered the fearless man. Unless you can protect your country by your own valor, I shall rule the whole of it. But if you can wrest my inheritance from me, this I shall be subject to you. And let us stake our patrimonies one against the other, and whichever of us two proves victorious, let him be master of both lands and peoples. Hagen and Greenock were quick to advise against it. We do not aspire to gain any land by force at the price of the slaying of one warrior by another, answered Greenock. We possess rich territories that render service to us as to their rightful lords, nor could they be in better keeping. The king's friends stood around him with fierce anger in their hearts, among them Otwin of Metz. These terms displease me greatly, said he. Mighty Siegfried has challenged you without provocation. Even if you and your brothers lacked forces to defend you, and he came at the head of a royal army, I fancy I should compel him with very good reason to have done with such swaggering. This stung the warriors from the Netherlands to anger. Do not presume to raise your hand against me. I am a mighty king, while you are but a king's vassal. I tell you, a dozen such as you could never face up to me in battle. True nephew of Hagen that he was, Altwin shouted for swords. The king was sorry that Hagen kept silent so long, but Greenock, as brave as he was unabashed, intervened. Put your anger by, he told Altwin. My advice is this. Lord Siegfried has done nothing to us that we cannot settle courteously, so that we may have him for our friend. This would be more to our credit. We, your knights, have every cause to resent his riding here to Worms to battle. He ought to have refrained. My lords would never have wronged him so. If what I have said irks you, Lord Hagen, retorted Siegfried, the powerful man, I will show you that I mean to have the upper hand here in Burgundy. It falls to me to prevent it, rejoined Greenock, and he forbade all his followers to say anything in arrogance that might arouse Siegfried's displeasure, while Siegfried, too, was mollified by thoughts of lovely Kriemhild. Why should we fight you? Asked Greenock. For all the warriors that must die we should gain little honor, and you small profit from it. But Siegfried, son of Sigmund, answered, What are Hagen and Oltwin waiting for? That they and the many friends whom Hagen has here do not rush into the fray. but these had to keep their peace as Grinnet had commanded them. "We bid you welcome," said Ute's son, "together with your comrades in arms who have accompanied you. I and my kinsmen shall be glad to attend you." Word was given to pour out Gunther's wine in greeting, after which the king declared, "Everything we have is at your disposal, provided you accept it honorably. Our lives and our wealth shall be shared with you in common." Lord Siegfried was somewhat appeased. Orders were given to store their gear away, while the best possible quarters were sought for Siegfried's squires, and they were made very comfortable. In the days that followed, Siegfried was most welcome guest among the Burgundians, and believe me, he was honored by them for his manly courage 1,000 times more than I can tell you, so that none could see him and harbor any grudge against him. When the kings and their vassals sought recreation, Siegfried was always the best, whatever they did. He was so strong that none was a match for him, whether at putting the weight or throwing the javelin, and whenever gay knights were passing the time with the ladies and displaying their good breeding, people were glad to see him, for he aspired to a noble love. Whatever the company undertook, Siegfried was ready to join in. Meanwhile, he cherished a lovely girl in his heart, and was cherished in return by the same young lady, whom he had never seen, but who in her own intimate circle nevertheless often spoke kindly at him. When the young knights and squires had a mind for some sport in the courtyard, the noble Princess Kriemhild would often look on from the window, and as long as it lasted she needed no other entertainment. Had Siegfried but known that his beloved was observing him, it would have been a source of unending delight to him, and if he could have seen her, I dare assess no greater pleasure could ever have befallen him. And when he stood in the courtyard among the warriors to pass the time, as people still do today, Sigling's son made such a handsome figure that many fell deeply in love with him. As to Siegfried, he often thought, "How shall it ever come about that I may set eyes on this noble young lady? It saddens me that she whom I love with all my heart, and have long so loved, remains an utter stranger to me." And whenever the great kings rode on circuit through their lands, their retainers perforce accompanied them, and Siegfried among them, much to Kriemhild's regret, while he too was often in great distress from the love he bore her. Thus Siegfried, you must know, lived with those lords in Gunther's land for a year on end, without ever having seen the lovely maiden who was to breed him much joy, and yet much, much sorrow too.